The World Health Organization has estimated more than 314 million people worldwide are either blind or visually impaired. However, only 1 to 7% of the world's published books are ever made into a format which these people can access. This has created what the World Blind Union is calling a book famine. Until we improve access for these people, they are being denied basic human rights, unable to access information, and thus unable to effectively participate in society. The Marrakesh Treaty is one mechanism that has been introduced with the goal of changing this. The treaty's full title gives a clear idea of its goal, that is, to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise disabled. The treaty aims to achieve this by obliging ratifying nations to introduce exceptions and limitations into their domestic copyright laws to the benefit of beneficiary persons. So who are these beneficiary persons then? Under Article 3 of the treaty, a beneficiary person is a person who is blind, has a visual impairment, or is otherwise unable, through physical disability, to hold or manipulate a book or to focus or move the eyes to the extent that would be normally acceptable for reading, regardless of any other disabilities. A visual impairment also includes perceptual or reading disabilities, which cannot be improved to allow the person to read to the same degree as someone not affected. As you can see, this definition is inclusive of people suffering from dyslexia, but excludes those who merely require glasses to read. Now that we have an understanding of who is set to benefit from the treaty, we can consider how the treaty seeks to achieve its goal. In order to improve access to information for these beneficiary persons, the treaty imposes two main exceptions and limitations on domestic copyright laws. It allows copies to be made, and it allows these copies to be imported and exported, all without the permission of the copyright owner. Let's look at these separately. Firstly, Article 4 obliges nations to introduce exceptions to allow beneficiary persons and authorized entities to make accessible format copies of works, without the permission of the copyright owner. Now, we already know who the beneficiary parties are, but now let's look at the other three key definitions: authorized entities, accessible format copies, and works. These are all defined in Article 2. An authorized entity is one that is recognized or authorized by the government to provide education, instructional training, adaptive reading, or information access to beneficiary persons on a non-profit basis. In Australia, some examples would be Vision Australia and Guide Dogs Australia. An accessible format copy is a copy of a work in an alternative manner or form, which gives a beneficiary person access to the work. Braille or audio formats are examples of accessible format copies. These copies are to be used exclusively by our beneficiary persons and must respect the integrity of the original work. Finally, works in this context refer to literary and artistic works in the form of text, notation, and/or related illustrations, whether they are published or otherwise made publicly available in any media. So this will include commercial works such as books, poems, novels, and sheet music, but also non-commercial things like bus and train schedules, but it will exclude films. Finally, the second important exception and limitation imposed on domestic copyright laws is dealt with in Articles 5 and 6 of the treaty. These articles allow for the import and export of these accessible format copies between beneficiary persons and also from authorized entities, again without the permission of the copyright holder. This is particularly important in facilitating an increased flow of accessible formats around the world. So you should now have a basic understanding of the Marrakesh Treaty and its plan of how to increase access to published works for those who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled.